Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to After School Animal Encounters, Earth Week Edition Humans and Animals. My name is Ryan, and I am the lead visitor services representative at the Harvard Museums of Science and Culture. And boy, oh boy, is that a title. I will be your co host today, along with my friend Javier, who is an educator with the Harvard Museum of Natural History and is standing by with some super amazing animals to show you. Also, because today is an extra special episode, we have an extra special guest. Arianna Lord, who is a Harvard graduate student studying evolution, will be joining us today to discuss her passion for invertebrates and a bit about what she studies. At certain points of the presentation, we will be switching between different camera views. So don't worry if the feed changes at times. We're just trying to give you the best views of the animals as possible. All right, now that we've got all that boring stuff taken care of, are you all ready to see some super cool animals? Javier, are you and the animals ready?
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Javier, how's it going today?
It's going well. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to see some fantastic animals and learn some neat facts.
Absolutely. Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to a very special Earth Week edition of After School Animal Encounters. Today, we are going to be talking about how our actions as human beings can create challenges for the many animals we share this planet with, as well as go over some of the positive things we can do. And as Ryan mentioned, we'll also be hearing from a Harvard grad student that loves invertebrates and learn a bit more about our relationship with this super important but often misunderstood group of animals. So why don't we get started?
Let's do it.
So during Earth Week, I like to reflect on the fact that all living things are connected to one another and that we as human beings have a direct impact on all our animal neighbors. One of the ways we do that is by our growing number of people on the earth. So as the number of people on earth grows and grows and grows, so does the demand and need for housing, for buildings, and for just general places for people to live. In fact, we build so much that it's easy to forget that there isn't an infinite amount of wilderness out there. The more space we take up as people, the less there is for animals that call wilderness their home. This is called habitat loss. Can you tell me a little bit about what the word habitat means, Ryan?
Well, for me, it means just really neat environments where certain animals can live. I love certain habitats. If you've ever watched this program before, you know I love tide pools. There's also a lot of great habitats around. What are a couple more, Javier?
That's a great question. So plain simply, habitat is a living organism's home, right? So another example might be a desert or a forest or a pond. There are lots and lots of different kinds of habitats out there. Now, one such animal that we find here in New England that is being impacted by habitat loss is this. So I'm going to share my screen here and bring out our first animal friend.
Oh, exciting times.
Let's see.
We've got to start the program.
And she's got a little towel there.
Oh.
Voila. So this is our eastern box turtle. Everybody see her okay?
Great shot.
Sometimes she's always on the run, so I got to be careful there. But this is a species of turtle whose native range extends all along the eastern United States, from as far north as Maine and as far south as Florida. And while it's not considered to be an endangered species, it is listed as vulnerable. So this basically means that their population numbers are on the decline. She may be a turtle, but she definitely picks up speed when she's got someplace to go. And apparently she
you got to keep her eye on her. She'll take off before you know it.
Now, part of the reason that these turtles are in decline is because many of the habitats this turtle calls home or prefers, such as shrubby grasslands, marshy meadows, open woodlands, places like that, have been changed over time by farmers looking to grow their crops. Of course, they need large areas, right? Large patches and plots of land to do that. So they change those areas that this turtle needs. And it's important to remember that when we're talking about habitat loss, all right, let's just go ahead and stop sharing and get close over this way.
As you can tell, it needs somewhat of a large area because it's already trying to get away from our table. And that was
When she's ready to go, she goes. But habitat loss isn't just about constructing homes, right? It isn't just about constructing apartments and other buildings. It's also about changing landscapes from one thing to another, especially the landscapes that animals like this rely on. So another thing that happens with habitat loss is what we call fragmentation. Of course, we know there's lots of different roads all across the country, and what this happens is what this does is it divides up the habitats we have left. And apart from that splitting up the areas which might connect to each other, it also creates another problem, right? If this turtle, which we now know is definitely in a hurry, has a place to go, wants to get from one place to another, it's presented with the challenge of dealing with cars. And definitely don't want to get in the way of a vehicle if you're a cute little box turtle crossing the road. You know what I mean?
And as spry as our turtle is, a car is going to be moving a bit faster, so you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. We don't want.
Just adorable, though.
So what exactly can we do to help combat habitat loss? Well, the first thing we can do is protect the habitats that are still around, right? Participating in your local elections and community decisions on about development ensures that your voice is heard. The more people that speak up for turtles and other wildlife, the better chance we have of keeping wild places wild. Now, another way is by creating new habitats, right? Do you have a big backyard with a beautifully mowed lawn? Well, why not consider setting aside a patch of that lawn where you're not mowing the grass every other day, but you're planting native plants, right? Creating new habitats for wildlife to use instead.
I was lucky enough to move into a new apartment recently that has actually a really neat outdoor space that has local plants. And I already have a mourning dove nest and an eastern gray squirrel nest. So right off the bat, it's only April something or other, and we've got animals in our natural habitats in my backyard.
Love it.
Close up.
The last little detail you can do to help is by supporting organizations that preserve our wild areas, right? Organizations like the Audubon Society or your local land trust. So there we have our eastern box turtle. Obviously,
great shot.
She's pretty spry, so I'm going to pop her back. Thank you, darling.
And as Javier does that, with a grown-up's help, if you go online to the Audubon website, if you live in the Massachusetts or New England area, there's going to be a bunch of great places that you can probably take a J trip to and see some really, really cool ecosystems and environments and habitats.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on to our next animal challenge now. It's probably something that you may have heard about in the news or read about. We are going to be talking about climate change. So we now know that human activity is having an effect on the world's climate and that our planet is warming, right? Melting ice caps, rising sea levels, stronger weather events. These are just a few examples of how climate change is affecting us all, including our animal neighbors. Climate change can have lots of different effects on lots of different animals in a variety of ways. And one such way is by causing longer and more intense droughts or dry seasons. And while this could impact a lot of different animals, there's one group in particular that I want to talk about today. So let me see if I can share my screen again.
And as Javier's doing that really quickly, there's lots of little ways that are super easy that you can help combat climate change. Some of my favorites: carpooling, riding a bike, eating less meat, using less plastic bags, really easy stuff that people of all ages can do to help out. Oh, there we go.
All right.
Look at the size of that bad boy.
All right, everybody. So you may be familiar with our pretty famous, if I don't say so myself, pixie frog or African bullfrog, right? One of the largest.
Most famous frog that I'm a friend of. So, I mean, I don't have that many famous friend frogs, but this is a famous friend frog.
We haven't gotten to Kermit status yet, but I think we're almost there. So this is one of the largest frog species in the world, and is a frog that is native to the savannas and grasslands of sub-Saharan Africa. It can actually withstand some pretty harsh environments and can live in places where it gets to upwards of 100 degrees during the hottest time of the year, and even dip below freezing during the coldest. But even though it's one of the most resilient frogs on the planet, there is still something it simply cannot go without. Any guesses, Ryan?
Junk food, candy. That's what I can't go without.
Great guesses, but not quite what we're looking for. Because this frog, of course, is an amphibian, it cannot go without water. Like all amphibians, pixie frogs rely on moisture and don't really do well during the drier times of the year. So in order to solve this problem, they burrow underground and wait out the warmer weather in a cocoon of their dried skin. They don't eat, they don't move, they just sit there and basically wait. You've probably heard of hibernation, right? Animals waiting out the winter. Well, this is kind of the opposite, and it's a process called estivation. But typically, a frog spends about 10 months underground waiting for that warmer weather to pass. And on rare occasions, they might wait as long as a year or so. But what happens if the rain never comes, right? What is our froggy friend to do then? Well, it actually can get in a lot of trouble. Resilient as it may be, it can't wait out the rain forever. Climate change has that potential to create longer, drier seasons, and this is a threat to water-loving frogs everywhere. So Ryan gave you already some fantastic ideas as to how we can help combat climate change. And I think the most important thing here is that it's going to take a lot of cooperation, right? We want to reduce, we want to reuse, we want to recycle, we want to conserve energy, we want to reduce our carbon footprint all around. But it's really going to be about us collaborating together to slow climate change as soon as possible. Now, I personally love the expression, think globally, act locally. And it's important to go out and find out what's your local community, what your city or town is doing to slow climate change, and how you can, jump on board and basically help. Now, the last little detail I have about climate change, probably the most important, is making sure that you educate yourself and those around you, right? The more people that get together and learn about climate change, the better chance we have of actually slowing it. So I'm going to put our froggy friend back over here. And I know
as Javier does that real quick, he mentioned that everyone can do a little bit. It doesn't take a lot. For instance, where the museum is located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Cambridge and some of the surrounding towns did a plastic bag ban, which was helped out by a lot of elementary, middle school, and high school students writing to their local government. So it doesn't matter how old or how important you are, everyone can help contribute in some way.
It's true. Well, at this point, I am going to say goodbye, and I think it's time to welcome our guest speaker.
Absolutely. So we're at that part of the program where we're going to wave goodbye to Javier, which means that it's time for our super special guest, Arianna Lord. All of us here at After School Animal Encounters thought, what better way to get people more comfortable, curious, and conscientious about some really cool animals than bring in a scientist to talk to y'all who loves these little critters as much or more than we do. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Arianna. Hi, Arianna.
Hello,
I'll see
everyone.
you soon.
My name is Arianna, and I'm a scientist here at Harvard. I study invertebrate zoology and evolution, how and why animals live in different places around the world. Although I love invertebrates, I know in general animals like spiders, insects, worms, and other creepy critters get a bit of a bad rap. They can be a bit icky, gross, or scary, but they're actually really cool and super important to the ecosystems that they live in. So for our Earth Day special this week, I wanted to share some cool facts about some of these animals because it isn't just the cute or big animals like polar bears and lions that are important, but also these little critters too. The first animal we're going to share today, I'm going to share today, is the Madagascar hissing cockroach. Some animals are found all over the planet and others are only found in one place. When a species is only found in one place, it's called endemic to that area. The more isolated or unique a location is, the more likely that you're going to have endemic species there. An island like Madagascar is an example, is off the coast of Africa, and it's separated from all other land masses by the ocean, and it's been that way for millions of years. When an area like Madagascar is isolated, unique animals will evolve there. The Madagascar hissing cockroach is an example of a species endemic to Madagascar, having evolved on this isolated island. Other species of cockroaches have wings, but not this one. Luckily, these guys mostly live in rotting logs, and they're really good at climbing. They can get pretty big as well. They can grow up to 2 to 3 inches, which is about the length of a crayon. And as you might guess from their name, they make a spectacular hissing sound. They do this by pushing air out of the special openings in the 4th segment of their body. They have different hisses to communicate different things, like, leave me alone, or I want to attract a mate, or come over here, I want to fight you. Super cool. Imagine if we communicated like that through hissing. Unfortunately, endemic animals, because they come from isolated areas, can easily become endangered or go extinct. They are very vulnerable to the results of human activity, things like climate change or the introduction of disruptive new animals and pests to a place where they're not normally living. Other things like deforestation, or as we talked about with the box turtle, habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. These all have bad consequences. Areas with high levels of endemism are really important to the biodiversity of planet Earth and also to scientific discovery. Because where there are so many unique plants and animals, that just means there are so many new things that we can learn from them. So it's really important that isolated and endemic animals are looked after really well. Another example of an endemic animal is the background I have behind me. What you can see here is a velvet worm species that's from New Zealand. Some velvet worms are highly endemic, and this is because they can't move around from place to place very easily. They have to live in moist air and have moist habitats, otherwise they'll dry out. Velvet worms have this really special quick drying slime that they can shoot out the front of their faces. This gluey slime has really special properties and is actually of medical interest. Now, the doctors say there need to be a bit more research, but one day it could be used to glue together open wounds and help heal burns. So the next animal that we're going to look at is a tarantula. Now, in contrast to the Madagascar hissing cockroaches, tarantulas are found on almost every continent except Antarctica. However, most of them are found in South and Central America. Did you know there's about 1,000 different species of tarantula? Now, these guys do look really scary, I must admit, but they're not so dangerous to humans as you might think. They're just a bit misunderstood. I personally have never been bit by one, but I've been told that a bite from a tarantula feels a bit like a bee sting. And I've been bitten by a bee and it hurt a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. Something else that's incredible about these animals is that the females can live up for 30 years. Now, that's a pretty long time. Some species can also grow as large as a dinner plate. Imagine that. Now, speaking of dinner, some people in other countries actually eat tarantulas. And this isn't the only species of spider or insects that get eaten. Eating insects is known as entomophagy, and it's becoming more and more common around the world. Seems a bit icky, so why is it becoming more popular? That's because it's a great sustainable source of protein. Farming mealworms, for example, requires far less land, energy, and resources than farming large animals like cows. More and more farmed insects are being turned into products that make it easier for you to incorporate them into your meals. Did you know people also farm crickets? And if anybody wants to bake cricket cookies, you could go on Amazon right now and order a bag of cricket flour. I'm sure there's a recipe on the bag. Now, this isn't anything new. Edible insects have been part of the human diet for a long time. Around 2 billion people around the world eat insects. Where I'm from, in New Zealand, people sometimes eat the larvae of the hoo-hoo beetle. These are called hoo-hoo grubs, and they taste like peanut butter. Imagine having that on your toast in the morning. While hoo-hoo grubs or other insects might be a bit challenging to think about eating, I recommend getting courageous and giving it a try. If you need some more helpful tips and facts about why you should eat insects, what we choose to eat doesn't just impact our health, but also the health of the planet. Our current food system is a really big contributor to climate change and having negative impacts on ecosystems and the animals that live in them. Examples of these include deforestation, water use, pollution, habitat loss. And if you think about it, every forest that's cut down for a farm or a palm oil plantation can no longer be a home for the animals that used to live there. Traditional sources of protein like meat and dairy have really high environmental footprint. So this makes the main environmental benefit of insects is that they can be converted into protein much more efficiently than any other livestock animal. So you can get the same amount of protein for a smaller environmental impact. Now, if insects really aren't for your palate, you can still make more sustainable choices with your food, and we should always think about where our food comes from and how it might be impacting the earth. Okay, so for the last thing we're going to look at today, it's a vinegaroon. Now, this is another arachnid, which means it's in the same group that includes spiders, like the tarantula. Arachnids are a very diverse group. This means there are many different families and species that all look quite different. Now, if you see the vinegaroon here, you might think it looks a bit like a scorpion. And vinegaroons are sometimes called whip scorpions. This is because their body looks very similar, but with the addition of a whip-like tail. They are called vinegaroons, however, because when they're attacked, they're able to discharge a vinegar-like liquid in defense, and their aim is very accurate. Think about if Spider-Man could shoot out jets of vinegar instead of shooting out jets of silk. The spray from a vinegaroon is about 15 times stronger than the vinegar you'll have in your kitchen cupboard. So you probably don't want that on your salad. Another member of the arachnid group that looks like a scorpion, but isn't, is a pseudoscorpion. Now, I'm going to share a video that I took myself here in Massachusetts. Here we go. What we see here is a pseudoscorpion. This is because they have a pear-shaped body and these large pincers that look like that of a scorpion. Let me just play the video again. These animals are so tiny that they often go unnoticed, even when they're fairly common in many environments. There are so many cool animals like the pseudoscorpion that you can find in your backyard, in your house, or in your local area. When I see a cool animal, what I like to do is I have this app that's on my phone, or you can get on your iPad, called Seek, and it's linked to this website called iNaturalist. So if you see a cool animal and you're not sure what it is, you can open the app, point the camera at the animal or a plant, and it will identify it for you through the camera. Not only does this help you or me to learn about new animals, but you can also save the ID to a big database. And scientists like me use this database for research and to help map where different animals are found all over the world. So if you're feeling excited and interested about any of the animals that we've spoken about today, I encourage you to go out and see what you can find, maybe bake some cricket cookies, become a naturalist, explore your backyard or local area, because these are all super fun and easy ways that you can get engaged with science and care about our Earth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arianna. I just learned so much about lots of great insects, and I absolutely adored seeing the pseudoscorpion. It was so small. So it looks like we're reaching the end of this portion of the presentation, but holy moly guacamole, there are a ton of great questions. Before we get to the questions, I just wanted to thank all of y'all for joining us today and having fun while we got to know some amazing animals. If you enjoyed this event and are curious about more great content online, be sure to check out HMSC Connects, where you can listen to podcasts, do cool activities, coloring pages, and get weekly e-newses with even more great content. All right, now it's on to the questions. Are you ready, Arianna?
I sure am.
All right, so we've got a couple questions that have been asked by multiple people. So I'm just going to fire away those first for you. But the first big one was that a lot of people asked is, how and when did you decide to become a scientist?
Well, I think when I was younger, I loved being outside and I loved being, checking out new things, going to tide pools, being out in the woods and the forest. And I guess I didn't really realize that, what a scientist does, and that a scientist is a job that you can go out and look at tide pools and in the forests and look at animals. So once I realized that I could get a job doing exactly what I loved, being outdoors and finding new animals, well, that was it for me.
Yeah, I've gotten to do some work as well. When you grow up and you just love animals, sometimes it doesn't dawn on you or click that that's what you can do for a job when you grow up, is just do neat stuff with animals. So in that same framework, we had a couple of questions and people are just interested about you being a scientist as well. So this comes from a few people, but they're curious about what is it like being a scientist in the field and what's it like being a scientist in the lab? And are they very different?
So for the type of research I do, there's a big field work component and there's a big lab work component. So the cool part about being out in the field is that you're out in nature, you're exploring, you're trying to find things. And to be honest, it's a lot more exciting. The lab work we do is equally important, and it requires, lots of measuring, lots of very careful, like little mixing together of different solutions, extracting DNA. That's a big thing we do. And then in addition to the lab work and the field work, a really big part of being a scientist is writing. So you do all the research and then you have to write up. And so you can share what you've learned with everyone else.
That's great. I never thought of writing as being a part of being a scientist. I usually equated it to the excitement and exploration of field work and the boring patience of lab work and having to be mashed those two together. But writing, that's a really good point. All right. So I'm going to fire away with a couple. Actually, before I forget, because there's a lot of people who just want to know the name of the app that you used again.
Right. So the name of the app is called Seek, SEEK. And this is, sorry, yeah, I can show it to you on my phone here. This is what you can see it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to throw a couple animal questions at you. All right. Patrick is curious, what does the tarantula eat?
Oh, you're right. So the tarantula can eat small vertebrates. So things like small birds, maybe, or even small little rodents like mice. They also eat other small invertebrates. So they have quite a varied diet, but they like to eat other animals.
Oh, awesome. Chelsea was curious, where did you find that tiny pseudoscorpion?
Right, yeah. So I was out on a walk on a nice trail here in Massachusetts, and I guess I'm in the habit of, like taking a good look at the trunks of trees and, like on the ground as I'm walking around. And it was in a piece of, I guess it was like a piece of rotting, like a branch that had fallen off on the ground. And it was really cool to be able to see it up close. Yeah, as you could see, it was tiny, smaller than the tip of your fingernail.
Oh yeah, it looked like super tiny in that shot there, which I was super impressed that you even saw it, like even getting that close to something and see something moving there. I mean, I've got good eyesight, but I don't know if I'd be able to just spot that thing in the dead wood there. So great eyes. All right, so I have a question for you that I think I know how you're going to answer, and it's a little bit about our program here today, is getting comfortable with some of these animals. And I apologize, I might mispronounce this person's name, but Chiharu was curious, why do insects look so scary?
That is a really good question. And I think part of it is that it's a comparison, right? Because other animals look really cute, and insects don't really have those big eyes or like a cute little nose or anything like that. So the reason they look so scary is because they look so different. And I think one way to sort of get past that is just to get more familiar with them, to, spend more time feeling comfortable. And there are some definitely really cute insects, I would say. For example, this velvet worm. If you Google velvet worm, with the help of a parent or something, you can see some really cute photos of a velvet worm. I would say that's probably the cutest insect, or well, it's not an insect, the cutest invertebrate that I know of.
And it's funny enough because unfortunately the Natural History Museum is closed at the moment. But when we were open in the shop, you had all these stuffed animals, penguins and koalas and cute things. We had stuffed animals of water bears and all sorts of really kind of not what you would consider cute. But if you make it into a stuffed animal, all of a sudden it's adorable. So it's just about realizing that things are only scary if you think they're scary. All right. So a lot of people have asked this next question, but I'm going to pick, and again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name, but Shweta is curious. What is your favorite animal? That's a tough one, I know.
That is really hard. I would say I feel like I should pick an invertebrate because I'm an invertebrate zoologist. But to be quite honest, my favorite animal is a bird from New Zealand called a takahe. And the reason it's my favorite is because everyone thought it went extinct for 50 years. No one saw it for 50 years until it was rediscovered in the 1950s. And I think that's just a super cool story. And also, they're really funny looking. And I appreciate that in an animal.
I also like a very comical looking animal. I think there's an extra little bit of how adorable they look when they look a little bizarre like that. And I think that's super cool. There's a couple animals that I know of that people thought, oh, well, it's all gone. And then time elapses and all of a sudden someone's like, hey, was that so-and-so? And you're like, looks like it wasn't gone. Really cool stories. So in that similar frame of reference, I have a two-parter. Chelsea is curious, what's your favorite insect? And then we had a whole bunch of people ask, what's your favorite insect to eat if you've eaten insects? So what's your favorite insect to look at and what's your favorite insect to consume?
I'd say my favorite insect is, I'm going to pick another New Zealand example. I'm being a bit biased today, but it's the giant weta, which is a giant cricket that can get about this big. It's huge. And I think it's just super impressive. My favorite insect to eat, personally, I've only ever had the hoo-hoo grubs. So I don't have a comparison, but honestly, it wasn't that bad. I need to order myself some cricket flour.
I'll say the peanut butter sounds pretty delicious. As someone that's eaten scorpions and crickets before, scorpion had a kind of peanut flavor to it. And to be honest, I couldn't taste the crickets because, like you said, it was flour and I had cricket cookies. So I was actually a little disappointed. I was hoping maybe I would have like a leg or something stuck in my teeth afterwards, but no leg. All right. So I've got a question or two now that I'm going to throw at you that has maybe more to do with your degree. And a couple of people actually were curious in certain different ways. They've described this question differently, but essentially, how can certain animals evolve in different ways?
Right. So a lot of evolution has to do with where the animal lives. So, and what, sort of food and resources are available to it. And an animal will often evolve to best suit its environment. So, for example, And also, yeah, so for example, and say like these velvet worms, I said that they've evolved to only be able to live in super like moist environments, so that they live well in rainforests, but they wouldn't live so well, for example, in a desert. They would dry out. And because they've lived in rainforests for millions of years, they've adapted to be best suited to a rainforest environment. So a lot of evolution has to do with where the animal lives and how that shapes it.
Oh, that sounds like it makes sense. We all know about, we've heard, of Darwin's finches, and there's other animals around that are really great examples of this. So if anyone's really curious about evolution, again, with the grown-ups' help, you can go online and look up certain areas that have these really, like you mentioned, Madagascar. It's usually neat little islands that are just kind of away from the rest of the world that develop these creatures in ways that are different from everybody else. And it's so neat to hear about. So I got another question for you. We'll see if this is personal or scientific, and we'll see if it matches up here. Amanda is curious, as you know, or if you know, what is the most important bug or insect in your opinion?
That is tough, because I feel like there's lots of different ways to define important. I think though, maybe I think spiders are incredibly important. They're incredibly important to the ecosystems they live in. They, they eat a lot of other insects, and that helps control the population of other insects. And so much, I mean, it's hard to pick, honestly, because there's also so many, insects and bug and, invertebrate species that we just don't know a lot about. Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably pick spiders as well. I know, for as much as my wife doesn't like spiders, she likes that spiders eat all of the other bugs that kind of are what we consider to be pests sometimes, even though they all play their own very neat and specific roles in the ecosystem. All right, so we've got tons of great questions. So I got a fun one for you here, and I'm actually really interested in this one as well. Do you know of any other bugs that shoot stuff like vinegar? Maybe not vinegar. Do you have any bugs that shoot any other, like you mentioned the guy behind you shoots that really sticky stuff. Is there a bug that shoots something maybe even weirder than vinegar?
Okay, yeah, sure. Maybe, so this isn't so much shooting, but more like secreting. So like just, it can't really aim for it. But there's some spiders called, sorry, I'm thinking of 3 different things at once. Okay, let me give you the first example first. There's some millipedes, so like centipedes and millipedes, that will secrete toxic substance that if you it's not like dangerous toxic, but if you pick it up, it will turn your hands yellow if the millipede walks across it with this substance it can secrete. And then the second example I have is called the spitting spider. And as we know, spiders spin webs, and the silk that they spin their webs from comes out the back of their abdomen. But the spitting spider has silk glands in its fangs. So it uses the spit. It spits out silk, and it uses that to capture prey. And that one does have good aim. So that's actually really cool.
Nice. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of my favorites that I've known of, and please, you're the expert here, so is and am I pronouncing right, the bombardier beetle? I think that there's one that shoots like an acid out of its rear end area as well that I've seen. That's pretty neat too.
Yeah,
All right.
I wish we could do something cool like that.
I know, right? Have some sort of weird projectile thing. That would be really cool. Okay. I got a layup for you. There is someone, Christian, is asking, how many legs do spiders have?
All right, yeah. So spiders, 8 legs, which, is a lot more than we have. And yeah, they're really important to be able to maneuver themselves around their web. Yeah.
Very cool.
Cool.
Ooh, I've got a good one here. So first off, Vivian wants to thank you very much for the talk. Lots of exclamation points there, so I can only assume she was excited. But she was curious about what, to your knowledge, is the most dangerous insect?
Okay, well, this, if you think about it, this is, it's a little unfair on the insect, I'm going to say, but I would say the most dangerous insect is the mosquito. And that's because not the mosquito's fault, but a lot of mosquitoes carry really other dangerous parasitic diseases that can cause things really bad, diseases for humans like malaria or like yellow fever and stuff like that. So I would definitely say the mosquito is the most dangerous insect.
Which is funny because for most people, you wouldn't think of it. You'd think of something with giant, fangs, or it's got some sort of crazy venom. Nope, it's just the annoying mosquito that we all swat when it lands on us.
I mean, luckily where we're living here in the Northeast, the mosquitoes around us don't carry those sorts of diseases, so they're fairly safe. But in other parts of the world, mosquitoes are very dangerous.
Yeah, I've heard that whenever you go and, like, for instance, when you might do some field work, you'll have to do a little bit of research about where you're going, what animals live there, and what potential hazards they might have for you. And again, just like you've said multiple times, education is that big, strong foundation of what we want here about the animals. The more we're educated, the more we like them, the more we can teach others about them, and the less scared of them we are. So I'm going to kind of pivot a little quick here away from the insects. And because I know we only have a little bit of time left here, I wanted to ask you one or two questions more in line with conservation. Javier mentioned recycling. We talked about less plastic bags, riding bicycles. Is there anything that you can think of conservation-wise that would be really beneficial to the animals that you love the most, in insects and invertebrates? Is there something that we might have missed that people could do, or something that they could research?
I think something that we haven't discussed already today, but is really important, is one of the main things about the animals I love the most is that we just don't know enough about them. And we also don't know how many animals are out there that we haven't discovered yet or we haven't described. And a really important thing about that is that we want to be able to conserve the environments that they live in. So places like rainforests and, islands and, like woodland areas. And we want to preserve, the wild spaces that there are in the world. And I think that's really the most important. And in regards to that, I think, we've talked about climate change. We talked a bit about, like the food system. I think if anyone wants something else they would be interested in looking into is how palm oil has a really negative impact on like deforestation in certain parts of the world. And there's a lot of really good things online. You can look up, like, does my favorite brand of chocolate contain palm oil, or like, is the palm oil in my food, sustainably sourced? I think that's something that is really interesting as well.
Nice. So just knowing more about what we eat and where it comes from and how that can be beneficial. Very cool. I know there's, even though we didn't mention it today, for those of you at home who are trying to think, how can I even first start that process? We didn't talk about it today, but the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a great site that helps you pick sustainable seafood and where and what types of seafood that you can get. So it kind of gives you a nice running start of what I can be eating to help out certain species. All right, so we have time for just about one more question today, Arianna, but I'm going to do it as a two-parter, and they're going to be a little bit sillier because we're going to end the day that way. So the first one, not as silly, but if you don't know what the longest insect on Earth is, if you do know, we can know. But if not, what's the longest insect on Earth that you've ever been around?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm not sure what the longest insect that there is on the whole Earth. I think that the longest insect I know of would be probably one of these guys. They can grow up to 15 centimeters long, which is about this big, which is pretty big for an insect, or not an insect, for an invertebrate. Yeah.
That's pretty big. All right. And the final question is going to be super silly because that's how we like to end it. So we weren't able to hear the cockroach's hissing sound, but Elizabeth is curious if you've heard it and what's your best hissing cockroach impersonation?
I haven't heard it in person because Javier had the cockroaches there today. But all right, for a hissing cockroach impersonation. Yeah.
Well, that was pretty good. I think you did this cockroach species a solid there with that impersonation. But well, all right, y'all. It looks like that's all the time we have to today. But let's give a big hand for Arianna and the animals. Anything you want to say to the folks at home, Arianna?
Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to me. And I hope you all learned at least one new thing.
Fantastic. I've learned at least 5, and that's a big deal for me because we do these all the time. All right. Well, thanks so much for attending this edition of After School Animal Encounters. And be sure to keep your eyes open for more to come. Have a great day, everybody.